Move after move, breaking news after breaking news. This entire offseason has seemed to be one that has been extremely aggressive by the Pittsburgh Steelers general manager, Omar. But has it really? We'll break down some of the moves that he's made and how aggressive have they really been. And should we expect an aggressive move in the draft? With all these moves that are going on, I think we're starting to get a better or a clearer picture of what the Pittsburgh Steelers may kind of plan to do in the first couple of rounds in this upcoming 2024 NFL draft. With that being said, let's get into it. So the first moves that everybody's going to look at when it comes to Omar is going to be the quarterback moves. Obviously, it's the biggest piece of the puzzle, so to speak. So all eyes are going to be focused in on that position. And Omar went out and got Russell Wilson, who's a $39 million quarterback. Well, at least that's what he's getting paid this year. But not all by the Steelers. In fact, the Steelers are going to have a small fraction of that, only paying just a little over $1 million. The Denver Broncos are going to cover the rest of the tab. Now, the Steelers didn't sign Russell Wilson for a longer contract. They've come out openly stated that Russell Wilson is in the pole position. He's going to be the guy getting the first team reps. In my opinion, it's going to be his job to lose. But he doesn't have a contract past this year. So there's no real commitment there. And I know that they have stated that they want him to be successful, and the plan is to sign an extension at the end of the season. Well, obviously, that's the plan. The plan every season is to win the Super Bowl and to re-sign every player that you possibly can. Now, obviously, if things don't work out, there's got to be some insurance plans. So in comes Justin Fields, who I think is a little bit more than an insurance plan. Based on some of the statements from Tomlin and the owner, in my opinion, it sounded like the Steelers were talking with Chicago about Justin Fields for a while now. It sounds like, those conversations maybe perhaps weren't going in the direction that they wanted them to. And they settled in on a Russell Wilson, kind of pick up a quarterback before you lose all your options kind of thing, right? And again, I mentioned $1.2 million, I believe, not the biggest risk in the world. Things go south with Kenny Pickett. He asks for a trade. So the Steelers ship him out to a place where he's really not going to have an opportunity to compete, and probably to a place in Philadelphia that may have been a competitor with the Pittsburgh Steelers for the acquisition of Justin Fields as their backup quarterback, as they may or may not have some concerns with Jalen Hurts. I know they paid him a lot and this, that, and the third, but if you go look at their contract on him, in my opinion, it was more team-friendly after the first couple of years as far as the possibility of letting him go. Dead money isn't going to be as bad. So maybe the Steelers were competing with the Chicago Bears for Justin Fields with Philadelphia. Now, obviously, the Philadelphia Eagles would probably have to give up more to a conference rival in the Chicago Bears than the Pittsburgh Steelers would have had to. So the Steelers, gave up Kenny Pickett, a first-round pick from just a couple of years ago, for a swap of picks, basically moving up 20 spots into the late end of the third round. In the compensatory portion of the third round, means basically a fourth-round pick. It's after everybody picks their picks in the third round. But it is 20 steps ahead of where they were. They also got a pair of seventh-rounders, I believe, in next year's draft. To me, that's not a lot of compensation to give up for a quarterback that was drafted in the first round. I assume if they were trying to get Justin Fields, then they were probably going to have to give up a lot more. And given how free agency had played out and the quarterbacks going where they went, and as the pieces started to fall together, less and less opportunities arose. And so in that moment, the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to acquire Justin Fields for a future 6th-round pick. But how aggressive was that move? Was it really aggressive? I don't think it was very aggressive. You're giving up a future 6th-round pick. That's not saying that this guy's going to be your future either. The likelihood of the Pittsburgh Steelers signing his 5th-year option is probably slim to none. I would think that the Pittsburgh Steelers would want to extend Justin Fields, but when are they going to want to do that? Are they going to want to do that now before he's even had an opportunity to throw the ball in front of the coaches? Or are they going to want to get him into training camp and those type of things before they decide on if they're going to extend him? Now, if they choose to extend him, let's just say they do that in training camp before the start of the season, give him a 2 or 3 year extension. What does that say to Russell Wilson, who is also hoping for an extension or a future with the Pittsburgh Steelers, not just throughout this year, but going on forward? Look at what happened at Denver. And I'm sure unless there was just no other opportunities, Russell Wilson didn't want to put himself in a position where he's going to end up losing his job to the younger guy behind him who got the extension, who's going to get paid. At the end of the day, the Steelers just paying him slightly over $1 million. So it's not a lot of compensation, especially for this position. Now, the Steelers went ahead and signed Kyle Allen also to compete in the quarterback room, but I think that his only competition is going to be with whoever the Pittsburgh Steelers acquire for rookie camp, whether that be at the late end of the draft or in the undrafted free agency. Obviously, if the Steelers had it their way, they would go to the Super Bowl and then extend Russell Wilson and have that good problem where Justin Fields excels during training camp and preseason, which I have no doubt he won't. He is a NFL starting quality quarterback, in my opinion. And during preseason, he's going to be going up against backups and defenses that aren't really designed or built around what your strengths and weaknesses are. Everything's going to be vanilla. I mean, what did we see last season in preseason from the quarterback position that didn't translate into the regular season? So I think it's going to be an interesting competition come training camp. And I do think it's going to be a competition. I don't think that the position is going to be straight up given to Russell Wilson. I think he's going to have the advantage, no doubt. But I do think that the Steelers maybe see a future with Justin Fields. And if they see the right things, might want to extend him before. And like I said earlier, how is that going to affect Wilson? And while we're on the topic of quarterbacks, I kind of got some mixed feelings about Justin Fields getting number 5. I know it's just a number. It shouldn't affect anybody on the field. But, honestly, I think that there's something to it. I mean, if you look good, you feel good, you play good, right? Ain't that what like Deion Sanders said or something like that? I understand that the number on the jersey really isn't going to play a huge role on the product on the field, right? It really shouldn't, regardless. I just don't like this old school approach. Now, this is a number that hasn't been given out because of Gary Anderson. He was the last player of the Pittsburgh Steelers to wear number 1. Now, it's not officially retired, but there's been a few players who have requested it, and I'm positive that Justin Fields was probably one of them as well. And they not get the number. I was shocked when Patrick Queen got the number 6, to be 110% honest with you guys. So he's number 5. And to be honest with you, if he ends up being the starter, I'm not sure I'm going to end up grabbing the number 5 jersey. I just don't know how I feel about number 5 in the Steelers uniform for the quarterback position. It's always been, in my mind, a backup position number. It's kind of like when George Pickens was drafted. Draft night, I said that if he ends up getting number 1, I was gonna cop his jersey. It was gonna be mine. Fast forward to going into year 3, he's number 14, and I don't have a 14 jersey. So is it just for the jerseys? Maybe. Another acquisition in the free agency that one would consider to be pretty large would be the acquisition of Patrick Queen. Now, with Patrick Queen, he is the guy that I think most people didn't think that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to target. The Steelers are not usually a team that's going to set the market when it comes to free agency, especially if they're free agents coming in. And when it comes to Patrick Queen, he was expected to make somewhere around the $17-18 million a year, similar to his former counterpart, Roquan Smith. However, the Steelers got him for, in my opinion, a steal, under $14 million a year. And I think that the only year that's guaranteed out of his 3-year contract is the first one. There's been a lot of questions whether or not Patrick Queen's success was a product of Roquan Smith or not. And I think the Steelers, may have that same concern. Their contract would say so, in my opinion. Given the fact that this is a young guy, he's 24, he still has a lot of football ahead of him. He's going into the prime of his career. And maybe just the market wasn't there for him, and this was the best deal he could get. And I know that there's a lot of inside linebackers out there probably a little upset of how low this contract was set, right? But to me, I don't see it to be that aggressive, just kind of going back to the aggression aspect of it. I think it's a relatively safe move. It's going to help the Steelers. I think there's a high reward here, very low risk. I mean, if it doesn't work out this year, you're probably going to, be in prime position next year for a middle linebacker. However, you're not paying for it in the future if it just doesn't work out. You know what I'm saying? So I don't find it to be that aggressive. You also have the trade with Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers for Dante Jackson, cornerback that the Pittsburgh Steelers have had interest in going back to his college days and going into the NFL draft. He's a faster cornerback. I think that the Steelers are expecting him to be cornerback 2. I think that with his speed, it would complement Joey Porter's length and aggressiveness, who doesn't have the speed, but has the physicality and man coverage ability to lock down majority of the wide receiver ones that he has faced in the NFL. But the trade, to me, wasn't aggressive. I mean, the Steelers traded Deontay Johnson for Dante Jackson and a 6th-round pick. It's not the biggest or the most aggressive deal. They are now without a top wide receiver, in my opinion. George Pickens can be that wide receiver 1. I get it. But in my opinion, I think that they need that Deontay Johnson type of receiver, the Antonio Brown type, the Santonio Holmes type, somebody that runs cleaner routes and has an extensive route tree, so to speak. Now, I think that George Pickens, he can kind of get there, I think. But when I look at the receiving cores of the past when it comes to the Steelers, they've always had the Antonio type, the Martavius Bryant type. And I've always thought of George Pickens as that Martavius Bryant type of receiver. Not that he is at the same level or anything. I think that George Pickens is a much better receiver. But when you are filling out the prototype receivers for your group, I think he fills that slot. And so the Steelers need to fill in Deontay Johnson last season. When Deontay Johnson went out, Calvin Austin was in. Now, Calvin Austin, in my opinion, he might be on the hot seat a little bit. Not because of his bad play or anything like that. I thought he did well, when it came to his punt returns, and I think that he'll have that aspect. And I think his speed is a fit in any offense. Those are things you can't coach. However, he's on the smaller side, and I think that the Steelers like their wide receivers to block, and especially Arthur Smith. I think that's a big component in what he wants out of his receivers. But you can't take away the impact, like I said, that Austin had on special teams. Well, the Steelers signed Cordell Patterson. Now, I think that his signing was more to do with the new rules that were brought in, which is a great transition into the rules there. But there's a new rule when it comes to the kickoff. It's going to be more like XFL, where there's going to be a specific area where the kicker has to kick the ball into. There's penalties if the receiving team fair catches the ball or downs the ball inside of that area. And there's penalties for the kicking team to either not reach that zone, which I believe is the red zone from the 20 to the end zone. And there's penalties also if the kicking team kicks it past the end zone. And those penalties are if the receiving team downs it or fair catches the ball, they'll get the ball at the 20-yard line. And if the kicking team kicks the ball out of the back of the end zone or it's a touchback, the offense will start at the 30. And if the kick doesn't reach the kicking zone, it's considered a kick out of bounds. It's a little complicated, but I think it'll be something that everybody will come accustomed to sooner than later. I actually kind of like it because to me, it brings back the kickoff and the kick return. Last year, it just kind of felt like it's probably your best bet to fair catch the ball and get it to 25 or let it bounce out the end zone. I mean, when you caught the ball and you were trying to move up the field, bad things were happening, whether it be penalties or fumbles or Gunnar Olszewski trying to toe tap on the sideline on a kickoff that gave the ball to the offense inside their own 15. But I digress. So is Cordell Patterson a threat to Calvin Austin there? I think one would say maybe, perhaps. I think that Cordell Patterson could specialize just in kickoff returns, and they'll have Calvin Austin just for punt returns. But that's dedicating two players just specifically for special teams. Now, I know that Cordell Patterson, he's up there in age, so he's probably not going to do both. And I don't really see him being a huge component in the offense. I know he's done some things, and he may have a package here or two, and he may get it on the field, but I don't think he's going to be as big of an impact on the offense as, obviously, on the special teams. But I do like this new rule. Like I said, it brings back the kickoff and kick return, a play again, and teams have to address it, right? And they have to conform to the new rules. And it's not just knowing the rules, it's also player personnel. You're going to have to now, like with Cordell Patterson, the Calvin Austin type, address certain positions for special teams, just special team specialists for your roster. How is that going to shape up your create or build your roster? And it's also going to affect on who you have active on game day. I'm super intrigued by this. And if it doesn't work, they'll move away from it next year. I do think that the optics of it, it does look kind of weird, but in theory, I think it's smarter, it's safer, and it brings the play back in. So I'm all for it. The other rule that came in is the hip drop tackle rule. When it comes to this rule, I understand it. It's caused a lot of injuries. It's caused some injuries to some key players on the Steelers. Le'Veon Bell was a victim of a hip drop tackle by a Burfict several years ago. I do understand that it's also going to make it, more difficult for I do understand it's going to make it more difficult for the defense to do their job, especially in the trail position. This is when this tackle is usually applied or tried. It's when the defender is approaching the ball carrier from behind, dives, and in the process of wrapping the ball carrier, they swing their hips and legs around to cause a downforce motion on the legs, thus resulting in some severe injuries. The worst part about this is, if a player is moving forward and you're trying to get them to stop or even come backwards, so that way they don't get the line of gain or the first down or a touchdown, that's going to be eliminated. What the players are going to have to do is learn to not swing their hips out there and just kind of fall in the back of the legs and hope that when you begin this, it's not too late and that player is not close enough to reach over, whether it's the first down or the touchdown. But like any other rule, is it new? Does it suck? Yeah, it does now. But I think it's kind of like any other rule that's been enforced, by the NFL. It sucks at first. Then you learn how to do things better. It's coached better. And then you get over it. You get to doing what you get to doing. I know it sucks at first, but, players will adjust. The game will move on. I don't think it really does have that effect as most people think. I know that everybody says, the NFL wants more scoring, and that's probably true. However, if you look at last year, I think that defenses did a lot better last year. Now, I think that is probably more of a product of the offenses not being able to and get in certain rhythm due to the practices softening up and not allowing for padded practices. I think there's a reason why the Steelers played well when they had a padded practice. They weren't practicing in shorts all week. They practiced anticipating the hits. So when they went out there on the field, it resulted in a better product, in my opinion. So when I look at last year and I see how the defenses played, and I'm not seeing this as going to be another situation where this could turn this into a high-scoring game or any of those type of things because this rule is being taken out. I don't really see this rule being enforced very much for the first year. I think that players are going to get fined, like Dave Schofield says. I agree with him. He says that this is probably a situation more that you'll see some penalties for the more egregious, hit drop tackles. But, for the most part, I think that anything incidental or from habit will probably result in just a fine until, probably for the first 3/4 of the season, maybe half of the season. But overall, I'm not against it. Like I said, it's just another thing that the defenses are going to have to become accustomed to. At one point, it was all right to clothesline a receiver running over the middle. It's no longer like that. Defenses have adjusted. They survived. There are still good defenses out there since then, and there will be good defenses out there after this. So with all that being said, and Omar Khan doing his things in free agency, and the Steelers picking up players, there's new rules, and the Steelers have adjusted to that with their roster, like I mentioned, acquiring Cordell Patterson. So where do they go in the draft? The biggest glaring need, in my opinion, are going to be the tackle, center, wide receiver, and defensive line positions. Now, I know a lot of people are going to put in the cornerback into that realm as well, but I really do think that your guys that you have for CB1 and CB2 are found. I think they need some help in the slot position, which isn't something I'm not sure that the Steelers are going to go and target in early rounds of the draft. Middle linebacker was filled by Patrick Queen, and Landon Roberts is still on the team, and Mark Robinson is taking steps forward in the right direction. Another year under his belt, maybe perhaps he'll be that guy on the field a little bit more often. To me, I think the writing is on the wall. The Steelers are going to probably go tackle in the first round, and in the second round, that's where things get kind of foggy for me. Do they go center and address the position that probably should have been addressed years ago with Creed Humphrey or Tyler Linderbaum or someone in free agency? Or do they go and get a wide receiver? Because I don't think you need to get one in the first round. I know that the Steelers, in my opinion, have a huge hole there. Wide receiver one. In my opinion, I think it's going to determine on how the board falls. If the centers are obviously starting to go and one of the top three are still there at 51, I think the Steelers probably take that center. But if only one center is gone by then, the Steelers use, that second, third, and another pick to get back into the second round and acquire a center or wide receiver. But I think this is going to be the round with the biggest question mark, so to speak. Now, from what I understand, is the wide receiver position is deeper in this draft than the center position. So does that also have pushing your decision one way or the other when it comes to the acquisition in the second round, maybe even in the first round? If the center is picked up, let's just say it's JPJ before 20, do the Steelers think about Zach Frazier before the second round? I think in a perfect world, the Steelers will end up with Georgia right tackle Mims. I think that's going to be the target. I think receiver is going to be next. I think the Steelers are okay with Nate Herbig as being the center. If one doesn't fall to them, I think they're okay with another center that might be one of those potential guys, right? We'll see how it plays out. One thing I know is that Herbig isn't going to get pushed back into the quarterback the way Mason Cole or Kendrick Green were. Those guys were smaller than Herbig. Herbig's a bigger guy. You can anchor there. He's not a mobile or fast guy. He's not going to be doing the pulling or getting in front of the running backs, or you're not going to expect him to be out there down the field. But when it comes to keeping your quarterback upright, making sure that the middle is not falling back into the QB, I think he's your guy. If the Steelers can't get one of the top centers in this draft. Now, I do think that there could be a fall in centers and in tackles. I think that Mims has a good chance to fall. Let's look at the draft board. There's only going to be 19 players selected before the Pittsburgh Steelers. Supposedly 3 of them are going to be quarterbacks. How many are going to be wide receivers? And how many are going to be left tackles before they start picking up on the right tackles? Especially with a guy like Mims who doesn't have all the starts under his belt. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I think that's going to be the target. And then I think that they're going to end up going with a center in the second round, wide receiver in the third. I think that's how I'm going to end up putting it for now. We'll see how things end up falling. Hey, you never know. The Steelers could end up trading for Brandon Ayuk, as the rumors have been speculating for the last couple of weeks, and that position gets addressed without having to go and pick one up in the draft. Then at that point, I think it's going to clear up that draft board picture real nice as far as where the Steelers plan to go. But I think those are going to be the 3 positions there. The first 3 positions taken, maybe even the first 3 rounds taken, are going to be tackle, center, wide receiver, defensive lineman. But we'll see. There's a lot of time left between now and the draft. We'll see where the Pittsburgh Steelers end up. And we'll be keeping our eyes tuned in to where the Pittsburgh Steelers are going for all these pro days. Kind of get another clear picture of what's going to happen on draft day until we get there. But I'm out of here, guys. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Please hit that like and subscribe button and ring that notification bell if you haven't done so. I'll be back on next time. Peace.